Here's a legal fact that most people don't know. In the United States, you cannot defame a dead person. Not legally, not actionably. Not in any way that a court will recognize. You can print almost anything about someone who has died, call them a criminal, a predator, a fraud, and their family has almost no legal recourse. That loophole has existed quietly in American tort law for decades. And now, because of a Wall Street Journal op-ed, a biopic that has made over $570 million, and a nephew who is not staying quiet, that loophole is becoming a national conversation. Whether you think Michael Jackson was guilty or innocent, this legal question matters for everyone. Michael Jackson died in June 2009. He was never convicted of any crime related to the abuse allegations that followed him through much of his adult life. He was acquitted on all counts at his 2005 criminal trial. The 1993 allegations resulted in a civil settlement, the terms of which have been publicly debated for decades, but no criminal charges were filed. He also left behind one of the most commercially successful music catalogs in history, a legacy that 17 years after his death is still generating global revenue, cultural conversation, and passionate debate. In late April 2026, a major biopic titled Michael, directed by Antoine Fuqua and starring Jackson's nephew Jafar Jackson in the lead role, was released theatrically. By mid-May, it had surpassed $570 million at the global box office. That commercial success reignited the debate that has never fully gone away. What is the honest way to tell Michael Jackson's story? What does a biopic owe to history? And who gets to decide what version of a complicated legacy? May 1st, 2026, the Wall Street Journal published a print commentary piece by veteran journalist Maureen Orth. The title was direct: Michael Jackson's biopic blinds us from the truth. Orth, who has covered the Jackson allegations for decades, argued that the biopic's commercial success was being built on a foundation of omission. That by downplaying or bypassing the abuse allegations and legal battles that defined Jackson's later years, the film was presenting an incomplete and missing portrait of its subject. She revisited the 1993 allegation, she referenced financial settlements, and she used language that was explicit and unambiguous, language that the Jackson family and estate found legally actionable if they had any legal avenue. The piece prompted an immediate response from fans who felt it was a deliberate attempt to undermine the film's success, and critics who felt it raised legitimate questions about biographical accountability. And from Taj Jackson, Michael's nephew, who framed his response not just as family defense, but as a call for systemic legal change. Here's the legal reality that Taj Jackson is pushing against. Under current United States tort law, defamation requires a living plaintiff. The legal reasoning is this: defamation protects a person's reputation. Once a person dies, they no longer have a legal reputation to protect. Their estate cannot sue. Their family cannot sue on their behalf for damage to the deceased person's name. This is not a fringe interpretation. It is settled law, established across decades of case precedent. What it means in practice is that a major media outlet, the Wall Street Journal or any other publication, can print characterizations of a deceased person that would be legally actionable defamation if the person were alive, and face no legal consequence whatsoever. The family cannot sue. The estate has no defamation claim. Taj Jackson's argument is straightforward. He says this legal framework creates an incentive for irresponsible journalism about deceased public figures, that it allows unproven claims to be printed as fact without accountability, that the reputations of dead people, and by extension their families, their children, their legacies, are left entirely unprotected. He is calling for legislation that would allow estates to bring defamation claims on behalf of deceased individuals. That is a legitimate legal reform argument. It is debated by legal scholars. Several countries, including some European jurisdictions, have broader post-mortem reputation protections than the United States. Whether you agree with it or not, it is a serious legal and policy question that deserves serious engagement. The argument against post-mortem defamation reform is also serious, and this script would not be honest if it didn't print. The reason American law generally does not protect the reputations is not arbitrary. It reflects specific values about free expression, historical accountability, and the public interest. If estates can sue for defamation on behalf of deceased public figures, the implications are significant. It could restrict the ability of journalists and historians to report critically on powerful people after their death. It could allow wealthy estates controlling the legacies of politicians, executives, artists, and other public figures to legally suppress unflattering but accurate historical accounts. It could have a chilling effect on investigative journalism about figures whose estates have the resources to litigate. These are not hypothetical concerns. They are the reason most legal scholars who have examined post-mortem defamation reform have approached it cautiously. The specific context of the Michael Jackson case makes this tension unusually visible. The Jackson estate has enormous resources. The allegations against Jackson involve alleged victims, real, living people, whose accounts would be directly affected by any legal framework that treated those accounts as actionable defamation. Any postmortem defamation law would have to navigate that tension carefully between protecting the reputations of the deceased and protecting the ability of alleged victims to tell their stories. That is not a simple balance to strike. Michael Biopic sits at the center of all of this, and it raises its own separate but related question. What does a biographical film owe to the full complexity of its subject? Critics of the film, including Maureen Orth and reviewers at Bloomberg and other outlets, have argued that a biopic which bypasses the most serious and contested chapters of its subject's life is not biography, it is hagiography. That presenting Jackson's life and artistry without meaningful engagement with the allegations does a disservice to both the audience and to history. Supporters of the film, and there are many, given the $570 million box office, argue that a film is not a court, that art can choose its focus. That celebrating a musical legacy is not the same as making a legal argument about guilt or innocence. Both of those positions contain legitimate points. What they share is an acknowledgement that Michael Jackson's story cannot be told simply, that the artistry and the allegations exist in the same life, that any honest engagement with his legacy has to hold both, not collapse one into the other, and not pretend either doesn't exist. The biopic chose one approach. Its critics chose another. The audience apparently chose the film. Here's what gets lost in the legal and media debate. There are real people on multiple sides of the story. There are people who grew up with Michael Jackson's music as the soundtrack of their lives, who experience the ongoing allegations as an assault on something they love and a part of their own history. There are people who say they were harmed by Michael Jackson, whose accounts have been public, detailed, and contested for decades, and who experience the biopic and the legal advocacy as an attempt to erase their experience from the historical record. There are children, Jackson's own children, who are navigating a father's legacy that is simultaneously celebrated globally and contested publicly. And there is Taj Jackson, a nephew, a person who believes his uncle was wrongly accused, who is using the tools available to him. Advocacy, platform, calls for legal reform, to push back against what he sees as ongoing injustice. All of these people are real. All of their experiences matter. The legal question Taj Jackson is raising, whatever you think of his specific motivation, is genuinely worth debating, because the loophole he is identifying is real, and it affects not just Michael Jackson, but every deceased public figure. The post-mortem defamation debate is not going away. Taj Jackson's advocacy has given it new visibility. The biopic's success has given the entire conversation a new audience. And the underlying legal question, what protections, if any, should exist for the reputations of deceased, is one that legal scholars, journalists, and legislators will be grappling with for some time. The specific question of Michael Jackson's guilt or innocence is not one this script resolves, because no court has resolved it. The 2005 jury acquitted him. The civil settlements have been interpreted in conflicting ways. The accounts of those who say they were harmed have not been adjudicated in a criminal proceeding. Those are the facts. They are genuinely unresolved, and anyone claiming otherwise in either direction is going beyond what the public records. What is resolvable is the legal question. It deserves the kind of serious, nuanced legislative debate that Taj Jackson is at minimum helping to generate. Michael Jackson died in 2009. 17 years later, his music is playing in movie theaters around the world. His nephew is starring in a biopic that has made over $500 million. And another nephew is calling for changes to American defamation law in his name. The debate about his legacy, the artistry, the allegations, the settlements, the acquittal, the ongoing accounts of those who say they were harmed is not over. It may never be over. Some cases in history do not close cleanly. But the legal question Taj Jackson is raising deserves to be separated from the Michael Jackson question and evaluated on its own terms. Should American law protect the reputations of deceased public figures? And if so, how do you balance that protection against press freedom, historical accountability, and the rights of people who say they were harmed? Those are real questions. Hard questions. Questions that matter beyond any single artist or any single case. Conversation is open, and it is worth having honestly without a verdict that the facts don't support and without dismissing the complexity that the facts do. Let me know what you think.